Hello everyone, Mike here. Uh, you've probably not seen me for a while because, well, unless you've been watching repeats of my old videos, which I guess some of you have, because I still get people talking about my stuff, even though it's been probably over a year since I posted my last video. And, I haven't been doing a lot of movie viewing lately. I saw the Zero Theorem with Al Badger a couple of weeks ago, but that's pretty much been it. And so when you're living here with no TV, no internet, no phone, there's not really a lot. Well, I probably could watch, DVDs and such, but actually what I've been doing a lot of is reading. In fact, I wound up reading this, The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss, and I started off reading its predecessor. What was it called? I keep wanting to say Name of the Rose. It's Name of the Wind. Yeah, I've got, what do you call it? Sean Connery on the brain, imagine that. But, yeah, that was not the book I was supposed to be reading. I was supposed to be reading Game of Thrones, because I'd heard so much hype about it, and the TV show and the book, and I have this thing where I have to read the book before I can see the TV show / film. Well, I got like a few chapters into Game of Thrones. This was very early on in the year, and I was just not really into reading at the time. And when I started to come back to work out here in the country, I started reading it again, and I was thinking, I've kind of gone away from this for a while and come back to it. I might as well just start over from the beginning, and I didn't feel like starting over from the beginning. I was thinking, if I'm going to be starting over from the beginning, why don't I just read a whole new book? And everyone is saying, ooh, Name of the Wind, Name of the Wind. You have to read this book. It's so amazing. So I bought into the hype, and I got Name of the Wind, and I got a little bit into it, and I thought, the next time I was in the bookstore, I wound up, I saw this, and I said, okay, I'm getting this now. Because that's what I do. It's like, if there's a book series, I will get the first one and test the waters with it to decide if I'm going to like it or not. And I decided a third of the way into Name of the Wind that I'm gonna want to read the rest of this. So I just finished this one, which is the second book in the series. It's like 1,100 freaking pages long. I just finished it yesterday, and oh my god, I really hate when a book ends on a cliffhanger. And, well, actually, it's not so bad most of the time, but this is like one of the few times where a book has ended on a cliffhanger, and I have to wait for the third book to be published before I can get some resolution. That is so frustrating. You can't imagine how frustrating that is. Well, except for the rest of you who've read this, and that's apparently quite a lot of you. But anyway, the whole thing about this book, well, this book series, I should say, and I do believe it's 3, because they hint about it, that it takes 3 days to tell the tale. And so that's, I guess it's a trilogy then. But we'll get into that later. But basically the story is there's this man who his family is killed by these mysterious beings, I guess, known as the Chandrian, and his goal is to find these creatures, find out about them, and kill them if possible, just get revenge on his slain family. So, basically the whole thing is he winds up going to this university, which is sort of like a university of magic, and don't think Harry Potter, you'll be very disappointed. And he tries to study, but, studying it makes it difficult for people to take him seriously, because it's something that is generally thought of as legend, so they think he's just like, dumb fairy tales, and just think he's a kid. He's actually quite young. He's about 15, 16 at the start of this story. At least at the start of the bit where he's going to the university. He gets there very young. But it's basically just his escapade, mostly at the university, but it goes farther afield. He winds up taking a year off from the university and going in service of this royal, sort of like a king or a duke or something, like at the other end of the world. And it follows his adventures from there. Yeah, I thought this was a very compelling story. It's actually told, it's kind of dual layered because it's actually told as a memoir, sort of, because this is actually in the future. He's living as like an innkeeper in a small town, and his apprentice, sort of, is basically blackmailing, they call him Chronicler. He's like a scribe. He's blackmailing this guy to get his master to tell his story because he's trying to get him to become like a great hero again and blah, blah, blah. And he's just... It's really interesting because I'd heard a lot of people complaining about this story that, oh, he comes across so arrogant a lot of the time, which I can understand that. I can understand why that would put some people off, but he's not irredeemably arrogant. It's like a lot of the arrogant decisions he makes are because of his youth. He's just like a, sort of a punk kid who thinks like he can, it's like, oh, I'm never going to die. Nothing horrible is going to happen to me because the world's my oyster and blah, blah, blah. Basically, the driving force of this story is, making really awful decisions and then having to deal with the consequences of those really bad decisions. And who can't relate to that? And he winds up sort of falling in love with this woman, this young lady who's... I think they bond from the same thing because she tends to make really bad life decisions as well, and they can really relate to each other on that level. I find that very funny. But this is... I don't know if I'd say this is quite as exceptional as people make it out to be. I do like that it doesn't go for cliched fantasy tropes in the way that a lot of stories do, and at the same time it doesn't go overboard in trying to be edgy or, oh, well, this is what a fantasy trope, this is what a fantasy book would normally do, we're going to do exact opposite, or we're going to try and, do it, but, with lots of rape and pillage and sex and blah, blah, blah. Don't get me wrong, there's, sex in this book, but it's not excessively grisly or graphic. I don't know if I'd call sex grisly, but well, it can be, and something. I'm not going to get on. I'm not going to get into that. That's a rant for another time. But yes, I did find this a very compelling read. I mean, it's definitely a dense world that you want to get lost in. And Patrick Rothfuss, one thing he's really good at is taking like implausible fantasy ideas and making them plausible. It's I don't want to get too spoilery, but there's one bit where they come across a dragon, and you know how in most fantasy stories dragons can talk and they're very intelligent and they have like great hoards of gold and all this blah 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 stuff. It's basically an overgrown brontosaurus. It's like bovine. It eats plants It eats plants. It's I'm not vegetarian, herbivore. That's the word I'm trying to think of. But it's very dangerous because it's very large and lumbering, and I guess it just is so big that it can't see people, or just thinks of them as like insects, so that when it goes on a charge, it's just very dangerous. And apparently it can breathe fire, too. But yeah, there's that. There's the whole magic thing. It's... I'm not good at describing this, but the way he describes it is it makes it seem like it could be something that could actually happen. Because it's, you're using, objects as a conduit for it, and it, also your body, it depletes it by using, it's not really spells, because they call it, not symmetry. what do they call it? It'll come to me. But yes, they approach it like a science, where sort of like Newton's first law, where every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Is that Newton's first law, or am I thinking of something? It's been too long since I've been to school, but obviously, but yes, they make it. They make it very plausible. He makes it very plausible the way he writes, and he actually writes very well. He It's basically a series of stories, and sometimes there's like stories within stories because you have characters telling stories, and I really like how he's very it comes across like a folk tale in a way, even though this is supposed to be the real version of the events. And speaking of his arrogance, he goes around deliberately, trying to going into taverns that he comes across and just, planting false stories about himself just to see how the stories about him populate as he goes around, and the stories get perverted, from... It's kind of like the telephone game where, someone tells a story and then, it gets to the end and it's like completely changed. That's kind of what the stories about him are like. Anyway, yes, I would recommend this. I don't know if it's quite as groundbreaking as a lot of people make it out to be, but I would recommend this book. Well, these books, I should say. And Patrick Rothfuss, please hurry up with number 3 of this series, because I really want to read it. Anyway, that's all for now. Bye.